I built their world from the ground up. Every number, every strategy, every sleepless night poured into a $20 million proposal. But when I stood in my boss's office, watching James Carter slide termination papers across his desk with a smirk, I knew I'd been betrayed. "Don't take it personally, Ethan," he said. His voice as casual as if he were declining a cup of coffee. But this was more personal than anything I'd ever felt. I'm Ethan Harper, 39 years old, a single dad in Chicago who gave 5 years of my life to Carson and Blake, a rising consulting firm. I was the one who crafted the project plan that secured the biggest contract in their history with Fallner Industries. Yet my name wasn't on a single page of that document. James erased it, claiming it was just how the industry works. And now he was firing me, calling it restructuring. I stood there, hands trembling, heart pounding in my chest, fighting to stay composed so he wouldn't see me break. I thought of Mia, my 13-year-old daughter, waiting at home, of the bills, the tuition, and the braces she still needed. He thought I'd slink away, a ghost erased from their story. He was wrong. In that moment, as I walked out of his office with a cardboard box holding my entire career, I swore I'd make him pay. Not with fists, but with something stronger. The truth. I left James Carter's office on a frigid February morning in Chicago, the temperature hovering around 30 degrees Fahrenheit, with wind from Lake Michigan slicing through the concrete streets like a blade. Carson and Blake's office sat on the 32nd floor of a sleek glass tower on Michigan Avenue, where fluorescent lights and the stale smell of old coffee clung to everything. I'd worked here for 5 years, climbing from a junior analyst to senior project strategist, but now I was just a 39-year-old man, clutching a cardboard box with a few family photos, an old coffee mug, and the wreckage of my career. The day started like any other. I arrived at the office at 7 a.m., checked emails, and prepped reports for the team meeting. For the past 3 months, I'd been perfecting the proposal for Fallner Industries, a major tech conglomerate looking to expand in the Midwest. That proposal wasn't just a project, it was my masterpiece. I'd analyzed data, built growth models, and fine-tuned every detail to align with Fallner's vision. I remembered nights working until 1 a.m., my laptop still open on my bed, while Mia ate dinner alone in the living room. "Just one more thing, sweetheart," I'd always say. But that one more thing stole hours from my daughter. Last week I discovered the truth. I went to James's office to discuss the final draft of the proposal, only to see the document on his desk, pristine and perfect, but my name was nowhere on it. "Don't worry, Ethan," James said, waving it off like I was bothering him over something trivial. "This is just how the industry works. You'll get credit internally." He flashed a smile, the kind that said he held all the power. I wanted to push back, but I didn't. I was too used to staying quiet, hoping my hard work would speak for itself. I was wrong. This morning James called me into his office. I thought it was a strategy meeting, but when I walked in, I saw a woman from HR I barely knew standing by his desk. James sat behind it, in an expensive gray suit, hair slicked back, and a smug expression. "Sit down, Ethan," he said, sliding a stack of papers across the desk. "We need to talk." I glanced at the documents. A termination agreement, effective immediately. "What is this?" I asked, my voice catching. "Restructuring," he replied, shrugging. "The firm needs fresh blood, new energy. You know how it goes." I didn't know. Not after everything I'd done. 5 years of dedication, late nights, and missed holidays with Mia. All for a you-know-how-it-goes, and a shrug. "I built the Fallner proposal," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That $20 million contract was my work." James laughed, a harsh grating sound, like I'd just told a bad joke. "Ethan, don't make this personal. You did well, but this is a team effort. No one's irreplaceable." I felt blood rush to my face, but I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I just stared at him, his eyes darting away, as if I wasn't worth looking at. "Thank you for the opportunity," I said, standing up. He looked surprised, maybe expecting tears, or pleading. But I'd learned how to walk away with what little dignity I had left, even if my chest felt like it was caving in. The HR woman escorted me out of the office, as if I were a criminal. My email was disabled, my keycard deactivated, before I even reached the elevator. In the parking garage, I sat in my beat-up Ford Escape for nearly an hour, hands gripping the steering wheel, my breath heavy. The anger surged, not just because I'd been fired, but because I'd let James use me. I'd seen the signs, times he took credit for my work. His patronizing remarks like, "You lack a killer instinct, Ethan." But I kept working, kept hoping. Now what? I thought of Mia, the rent, her tuition, and the braces she needed. I thought of the nights I promised to be home early, but never was. Driving home through the sleet, Chicago felt colder than ever. The skyscrapers glowed under their lights, but they weren't symbols of opportunity anymore. They were reminders of what I'd lost. When I got to our small apartment in Lincoln Park, Mia was doing homework on the couch, her hair tied up, wearing an oversized hoodie. "You're home early, Dad?" she asked, looking up with a smile. I nodded, forcing a smile back. "Yeah, finished early today." I wasn't ready to tell her the truth. Not yet. That night, after Mia went to bed, I sat in the dark living room and opened my personal laptop. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I logged into my cloud archive. There it was, every version of the Faulkner proposal, every note, every edit, and the original concept sketch, with my name and timestamp. I hadn't saved them to be strategic. I was just meticulous, always backing up my work. But now, they were my weapon. I thought of Lauren Brooks, the CEO of Faulkner Industries, who'd been a client of mine 6 years ago, when she ran a startup. "If you ever need a real opportunity, call me," she'd said. The builders deserve more than the sellers. I'd never called, but now, seeing her name in my contacts, I felt a spark of hope. I clicked compose. Subject: the real author of Faulkner's proposal. "Lauren, I hope you're well. You may not remember me, but we worked together." When I hit send, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I didn't know if Lauren would read the email or respond, but at least I'd spoken. I wouldn't let James Carter erase me. Not ever. I sat in my small Lincoln Park apartment, the glow of Chicago's streetlights filtering through the window, casting shadows on the kitchen table where my laptop still sat open. The email to Lauren Brooks, CEO of Faulkner Industries, lingered on the screen, the sent status like a silent declaration of war. It was late, nearly midnight, but sleep was impossible. Mia's steady breathing from the next room echoed, a reminder of why I had to fight. This wasn't just for me, it was for her. For the promises I'd broken because of Carson and Blake. I thought of James Carter, his smirk, as he slid the termination papers across his desk. His smooth voice. "Don't make this personal, Ethan." He thought I'd stay silent, vanish like a name scrubbed from the payroll. He was wrong. I checked my inbox for the 10th time, not really expecting a reply so soon. Lauren Brooks was a rising star in the tech world, a sharp CEO juggling multi-million-dollar deals. 6 years ago, when she ran a startup, I'd helped her build a growth model for a funding round. "Ethan, if you ever need a real opportunity, call me," she'd said. "People like you, the ones who actually build, are worth more than the ones who just sell." I'd never called. But now, with everything crumbling, I hoped she'd remember me. The next morning, Chicago was still gray, the temperature hovering around 32 degrees Fahrenheit, with biting winds from Lake Michigan. I brewed coffee, trying to keep my routine normal so Mia wouldn't sense anything wrong. She shuffled out of her room, wearing a Chicago Bears hoodie, her hair tied high. "Dad, no work today?" she asked, her eyes bright. I hesitated, not wanting to lie, but not ready to tell the truth. "Working from home today," I said, forcing a weak smile. Mia nodded, but her gaze told me she sensed something off. At 13, she'd grown up too fast, used to my absences because of work. After Mia left for school, I opened my laptop, my heart racing when I saw a new email. Subject: the real author of Faulkner's proposal. Sender: Lauren Brooks. I took a deep breath and clicked. "Ethan, of course I remember you," she wrote. "I still use the growth model you built for our second funding round. Thanks for reaching out. We need to talk. I have questions and an opportunity I think you'll want to hear about." I read it 3 times, nearly spilling my coffee as I sat up too fast. Lauren hadn't just responded, she wanted to meet. I called her that afternoon, my hand trembling as I dialed. Her assistant put me through immediately. Ethan, Lauren's voice came through, calm but sharp, the kind of voice that cuts straight to the point. "I've reviewed the documents you sent." She paused, long enough for me to brace myself. "And I'm livid." I swallowed hard, keeping my voice steady. "I just wanted you to know the truth. That proposal wasn't written by the person who pitched it. It was my work." Lauren replied instantly. "I know. The moment I read it, I saw your fingerprints. The way you structured the risk mitigation plan, the way you analyzed the data, no one else does it like that." She fired off questions about the research, the data modeling, even how I'd forecasted Faulkner's growth trends. I answered effortlessly, not because I'd rehearsed, but because it was mine. Every number, every line in that proposal belonged to me. "Ethan," Lauren said after a moment, her tone firmer. "I'm terminating the contract with Carson and Blake, effective immediately." My heart leapt. "You're sure?" I asked. "Absolutely," she said. "I don't do business with lie, and I don't reward thieves." I could barely believe my ears. Lauren didn't just believe me, she acted. But what she said next stunned me even more. I'm not letting a good strategy go to waste, she continued. Fallner still needs this plan executed. I'm launching a new consulting firm, and I want you to come in, as CEO of Lynn Harper Consulting. It's yours if you want it. I blinked, speechless. CEO, me, the guy who'd just been fired years, called replaceable in the worst way, was being offered a CEO role. You've always had a mind for building, Ethan, Lauren said, but you've never had the space to lead. I can give you that. I need an answer soon. I took a deep breath. I need to think about it, I said, though my heart. I understand, Lauren replied. But don't take too long. You deserve more than a footnote in someone else's story. The call ended, and I sat there, phone still in hand, my mind reeling. I thought about everything that led here, the late nights, the overlooked contributions, James's patronizing remarks. He'd said, "This is how the world works." Maybe he was right, but I'd prove that world could change. That night, I told Mia everything. She sat cross-legged on my bed, in her favorite oversized hoodie, her eyes locked on me. "They fired you?" she asked, her voice full of disbelief. "But you work harder than anyone." "I know," I said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "But sometimes, that's not enough. There's a new opportunity though, a bigger job." Mia looked at me, her gaze serious, like only a kid who's grown up too fast can have. "Are you scared?" "Yeah," I admitted. "But I'm ready." The next morning I called Lauren back. "I'm in," I said, my voice firm. "Great," she replied. "Your title is CEO of Lynn Harper Consulting. The paperwork's already in motion." Hours later, the news broke. Fallner Industries cancels contract with Carson and Blake, citing leadership concerns. I smiled, imagining James's face when he saw the headline. But that was just the beginning. Lauren forwarded me an email from James's assistant, trying to schedule a call to salvage the Fallner relationship. Lauren's note was brief. "He wants to talk to the CEO. Your move." I knew my moment had come. James thought he could control everything, but I'd show him who held the power. Not by shouting or threatening, but by sitting in the chair he'd never expect. I clicked into the meeting calendar, scheduling a call with James. Just thinking about the moment he'd hear my voice, realizing I was the CEO, sent adrenaline surging through me. This wasn't the end. It was the start of my revenge. I stood by the window of my small Lincoln Park apartment, gazing down at Chicago's streets shimmering under neon lights in the frigid February night. The temperature outside was about 30 degrees Fahrenheit, but inside me, a fire burned steadily. The call with James Carter was scheduled for tomorrow morning, and I knew it would be a defining moment. He thought I was just a fired strategist, someone who'd quietly vanish like a name erased from the payroll. But now, I was the CEO of Lynn Harper Consulting, and I was about to take the seat he'd never expect. I smiled, imagining how his voice would falter when he heard me say, "This is Ethan Harper, CEO." This wasn't just a call, it was a declaration, a statement that I wasn't someone who could be erased. The night before the call, sleep eluded me. I sat at the kitchen table, the dim glow of my laptop casting shadows on my face. I reopened the email from Lauren Brooks, who'd forwarded James's assistant's message with a brief note. "He's panicking. Seize this moment, Ethan." Lauren hadn't just given me a job, she'd handed me a stage to reclaim justice. I thought about the years working under James, the times he stole my work, his belittling remarks. "You lack a killer instinct, Ethan. That's why you'll never go far." He was wrong. My instinct wasn't in shouting or clawing for attention. It was in preparation, in the details he never bothered to notice. I opened my cloud archive, scrolling through every version of the Fallner Industries proposal, from the first draft with my name and timestamp to the final one James had stripped of my credit. These documents weren't just evidence. They were my story. Months of late nights, of missing evenings with Mia, my daughter. I thought of Mia, of the worry in her eyes when I told her I'd be working from home. "Dad, is something wrong?" she'd asked. I didn't want to scare her, but I knew I couldn't hide forever. Mia deserved to know her father wasn't just a victim. I was someone who'd fight back. The next morning, I woke early, brewed a strong cup of coffee, and put on the navy blue dress shirt I used to wear for big days at Carson and Blake. Mia had already left for school, but last night, she'd sat cross-legged on the couch, looking at me with bright eyes. "Dad, what's going on? You seem different." I smiled, brushing her hair back. "I'm about to do something big, sweetheart. Something right." Mia nodded, her grin radiant. Show them how great you are, okay? Her words fueled the fire inside me. I wasn't just doing this for myself. I was doing it so Mia could see we didn't have to bow to people like James Carter. At exactly 9 a.m., I sat in my living room, earbuds in, and clicked the call link. My heart pounded, but I kept my voice steady, breathing deeply to control the adrenaline. The screen lit up, and James's voice came through the speakers, rushed and strained, like he was trying to save a sinking ship. Lauren Brooks, thank you for taking the time. I understand there's been a misunderstanding about the Fallner contract, and I'd like to clarify. He trailed off as I unmuted my mic. This isn't Lauren, I said, my voice even but sharp. This is Ethan Harper. You're speaking with the CEO of Lynn Harper Consulting. Silent. A silence so long I could hear his shallow breathing over the line. I pictured him in his sleek Michigan Avenue office, hand gripping the phone, eyes wide with shock. Ethan, James finally said, his voice cracking slightly, as if he couldn't believe his ears. I wasn't expecting you. I smiled though he couldn't see it. I know, I replied, still calm. You wanted to talk to the CEO. That's me. He let out a weak chuckle, the kind people use when they're scrambling to regain control of a situation they've already lost. Look, Ethan, there's clearly a misunderstanding. If I'd known you were still involved with Fallner, I'd have handled things differently. I let his words hang in the air for a second, his audacity making my blood boil. You didn't know, I said slowly, each word like a blade. You erased my name from the Fallner proposal. You presented my work as your own. Then you fired me 2 days later, but you didn't know there was an issue. James's tone shifted to defensive, higher pitched, more frantic. I was under a lot of pressure, Ethan. The board wanted headcount cuts. I had to make tough calls. And honestly, you're a great analyst, but you're not leadership material. That stung like a punch to the chest, not because I believed him, but because it echoed the criticisms I'd heard for years. Too quiet, too meticulous, too much, but never enough. I took a breath, keeping my voice cold as ice. You're wrong, James, and you'll see that soon enough. He pressed on, his voice rising, as if trying to convince himself. You're making a mistake, Ethan, not just by walking away. You're burning bridges you might need later. Think about your future. Think about your daughter. That was the final straw. He dared to bring Mia into this. You don't get to mention my daughter. I cut him off, my voice sharp as a knife, each word heavy as stone. And I'm not burning bridges. I'm building my own. I hit the end call button, my heart pounding in my chest. But it wasn't anger. It was triumph. James had tried to belittle me, to intimidate me, but this time he couldn't. He'd heard my voice, knew my position, and I could sense his panic in every stammering word. But I knew James wouldn't stop there. He'd fight back, and I needed to be ready for what was coming. That afternoon, as I was checking emails, a message from Emily Watson popped up. Emily had been one of my closest colleagues at Carson and Blake, a brilliant analyst, who was often overlooked by James, because she didn't play the flattery game. Ethan, I don't know if you've seen what's being said, but I want you to know, I've got your back, she wrote. Everyone here knows the truth about the Fallner proposal. If you need a witness, I'm in. Emily's message was like a ray of light in a stormy day. I replied immediately, thanking her and asking if she could share more details. Call me tonight, she responded. I've got a lot to tell you. The call with Emily lasted minutes. She told me James hadn't just stolen my work. He'd done the same to her. And others. He erased my name from a major project 2 years ago. Emily said, her voice thick with bitterness. I pushed back, and he threatened to tank my performance review. I stayed quiet, because I was scared of losing my job. But you, Ethan, you stood up. You're inspiring me. Her words hit me hard. I hadn't realized my actions had rippled out to others. Thank you, Emily, I said. If you have any documents, send them to me. We'll do this the right way. Emily wasn't the only one who reached out. Over the next 2 days, I got a flood of messages and calls from former colleagues. Ryan Keller, young analyst I'd mentored, sent me a detailed timeline of projects, highlighting every instance where my name was removed or replaced in internal documents. You were the reason our strategies worked, Ryan wrote. James just stood on the stage and took the glory. Hannah Reed, a former HR rep who'd left 6 months earlier, called me on Friday night. Ethan, I've got something you need, she said. James pushed to alter your performance evaluations the quarter before you were fired. I have the originals. You were rated exceeds expectations before they changed it to meets expectations. They were laying the groundwork to get rid of you. I sat with that information, a dull ache, spreading through me, despite knowing the truth. It wasn't that I believed their lies, it was how deliberate they'd been. They hadn't just used me, they'd erased me, step by step, like a calculated plan. But now the pieces were coming together, and I was starting to see the full picture of James's manipulation. I forwarded the documents to Sarah Mitchell, my lawyer, who'd agreed to help if I wanted to take this to court. "This is gold, Ethan," Sarah said, as she reviewed Ryan and Hannah's emails. "But we need more to hit hard. Do you have anyone else who'll step up?" The answer came over the weekend, in the form of an unexpected message from Karen Ellis, a former partner. Karen had retired before I was promoted to senior strategist, but her name still carried weight in the consulting world. "Ethan, I've been following what's happening," she wrote. "I believe you. If you're open to meeting, I have something you need." I could hardly believe my eyes. Karen Ellis, a legend in the firm, wanted to help me. We arranged to meet at a small coffee shop in Lincoln Park, where soft lighting and the smell of roasted coffee eased my tension. Karen walked in, her silver hair neatly tied back, her eyes sharp but warm. She looked older than I remembered, but she carried the quiet authority of someone who'd once commanded boardrooms. "I stepped down before James took full control," she said, stirring her latte. "I saw some of the decisions being made, and knew I didn't want to be part of that direction. But I didn't expect things to fall apart this fast." I studied her face, trying to read her expression. "You knew something was wrong?" I asked. Karen nodded. "I suspected, but I didn't have proof. James was always good at covering his tracks. You're not the only one he tried to erase. You're just the first to make him pay." She pulled a black USB drive from her purse and slid it across the table. "This contains internal evaluations, meeting transcripts, and board communications from my last 6 months at the firm," she said. "There's also a draft restructuring plan, where James proposed replacing high-risk staffs before the company went public. You were on that list, not because of performance, but because you knew too much and asked too many questions." I took the USB, my heart pounding. "Why now?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Karen looked me in the eye. "Because it's time the truth had more advocates than excuses," she said simply. "And because you reminded me what real leadership looks like." I left the coffee shop with a mix of relief and weight. Karen, Emily, Ryan, Hannah. They weren't just colleagues. They were proof I wasn't alone in this fight. But I knew James wouldn't sit idly by. He'd fight back, maybe by smearing my name, spreading rumors, or even dragging me into a legal battle. I had to be ready, not just for myself, but for everyone who'd stood up with me. That evening, I sat with Mia, on the couch, watching an old comedy she loved. She leaned against my shoulder, laughing loudly, when the main character spilled coffee on himself. In that moment, I felt a fleeting sense of peace. "Dad, is everything okay?" Mia asked, looking up at me. I smiled, squeezing her shoulder. "Everything's going to be. I'm doing the right thing." Mia nodded, but her eyes told me she knew I was facing something big. And I knew for Mia, for myself, I couldn't lose. I sat in my small Lincoln Park apartment, the glow from my laptop screen illuminating my face, reflecting the lines of messages from Sarah Mitchell, my lawyer. On the kitchen table, the USB drive from Karen Ellis lay next to a cold cup of coffee, a silent reminder of the secrets it held: meeting minutes, internal evaluations, and James Carter's manipulative plans. Just days ago, I'd confronted James over a call, sending him into a panic when he learned I was the CEO of Lynn Harper Consulting. But I knew James wouldn't back down easily. He'd fight back, and I had to be ready. Chicago outside was still frigid, the temperature hovering around 30 degrees Fahrenheit, with winds from Lake Michigan slicing through the concrete streets. But inside me, a fire of resolve burned fiercely, not just for myself, but for everyone Carson and Blake had treated as invisible. The call with James still echoed in my mind. His voice had trembled when he heard me say, "This is Ethan Harper, CEO." He'd tried to justify himself, to threaten me, even dragging Mia, my daughter, into it to shake me. But this time, I didn't let him win. I'd ended the call with a sense of triumph, but I knew it was only the first step. Sarah had warned me right after, "James and Carson and Blake won't sit still. They'll try to smear you or drag you into a legal fight. They want you to panic and go quiet." I wasn't going to give them that chance. With the documents from Emily Watson, Ryan Keller, Hannah Reed, and Karen Ellis, I had enough evidence to not just defend myself but to strike back hard. On Monday, Sarah called me from her law office downtown, just a few blocks from Michigan Avenue. "Ethan, we just got a cease and desist order from Carson and Blake," she said, her voice calm but sharp. like a strategist gearing up for battle. They're accusing you of using proprietary information from your time there to start Lynn Harper Consulting and steal their client, specifically Fallner Industries. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. You mean the client I won with my own proposal? The client I knew before I even joined Carson and Blake. Sarah snorted over the phone. Exactly. It's a scare tactic. They're hoping you'll panic and settle quietly, or better yet, fold. But we've got the evidence, Ethan. How do you want to hit back? I didn't need to think long. Hit them hard, I said, my voice steady. Sue them for defamation, wrongful termination, and professional misrepresentation. Use everything we've got. Sarah agreed immediately, her tone brimming with excitement. I love that energy. I'll file a countersuit today, attaching the documents from Karen, Ryan, and Hannah. We've also got 5 witnesses ready to testify, if it comes to that. Emily, Ryan, Hannah, and 2 others from your old team. Adrenaline surged through me, not from fear, but from knowing I was on the right path. Just a month ago, I was a strategist scrambling to keep my job, worrying about rent and Mia's tuition. Now I was fighting to reclaim my reputation and reshape my story. Sarah moved like a storm, sweeping through every obstacle. Within 48 hours, she filed the countersuit in a Chicago court, backed by a thick stack of evidence, emails between me and Lauren Brooks, the original Fallner proposal with my name and timestamp, the altered performance reviews from Hannah and Ryan's project timeline. Most damning was Karen's USB, which held meeting minutes, where James discussed removing high-risk staff, like me, to clear the way for the company's IPO. There was even a draft presentation to the board, titled Restructuring Plan, Replace High-Risk Staff Before IPO. My name was listed, not for poor performance, but because I asked too many questions and knew too much about internal processes. This isn't just a personal lawsuit, Sarah said as we reviewed the case. We're exposing a system of manipulation. If we do this right, Carson and Blake won't just lose the case, they'll lose their reputation. But James didn't wait for us to make our move. A few days later, I got a message from Emily Watson, warning me that James was spreading rumors on LinkedIn and internal company channels. He claimed I'd left Carson and Blake due to poor performance, that I was difficult to manage, disgruntled, and even unstable. The words were painfully familiar, like a script written to smear anyone who dared challenge him. Emily sent me a screenshot from an internal chat group, where a mid-level manager parroted James's story, adding that I'd caused trouble before leaving. They're trying to shape the narrative, Emily said over the phone, her voice thick with anger. But no one's buying it, Ethan. Everyone here knows you were the one who made our strategies work. James just stood on the stage and took the applause. Emily's support warmed me, but I knew rumors could do damage if left unchecked. I called Sarah, and she proposed a bold move. We need to take this public, she said. Not just through the courts, but through the media. If we release Karen's documents and the witness statements, this story will spread like wildfire, and Carson and Blake won't have time to react. Are you ready? I paused, weighing what this meant. Going public wasn't just a risk for me. It would put Lynn Harper Consulting, Mia, and my private life under a spotlight. But then I thought of the nights I worked, until exhaustion, of James erasing my name from the Fallner proposal, of people like Emily still living in fear of losing their jobs. I'm ready, I said, my voice firm. Do it. Sarah reached out to a reporter from the Wall Street Ledger, known for her incisive investigative pieces on major corporations. We sent her the full dossier, Karen's documents, my emails with Lauren, Hannah's performance reviews, Ryan's project timeline, and 5 witness statements. Over the weekend, I sat with Sarah in her office, a modern space with windows overlooking the Chicago River. We reviewed every line, every file, ensuring every detail was airtight. We're not just exposing James, Sarah said, her eyes gleaming. We're setting a precedent. Companies like Carson and Blake need to know they can't treat employees like trash without consequences. I nodded, a strange calm washing over me. I wasn't scared. I felt free, like I was finally in control of my own story for the first time. The article dropped on Monday morning, with a headline that hit like a thunderbolt. Former strategist accuses Chicago's top consulting firm of retaliation and manipulation. The story spread like wildfire across social media and industry forums. From CEO to outcast, Ethan Harper shocks the consulting world. Another headline read. My phone didn't stop buzzing for 3 days. Journalists wanting interviews, former colleagues offering support, even strangers from New York to San Francisco sending messages of gratitude. Some called me courageous, saying I'd inspired them to speak up at their own companies. Others warned I was committing career suicide. that the consulting industry didn't forgive troublemakers. But to me, this wasn't about courage or self-destruction. It was necessary, the only way for me and others like me to be seen. The same day the article went live, Carson and Blake posted a statement on their website, filled with vague, empty buzzwords. We are committed to internal improvements, learning from past mistakes, and building a better workplace. They didn't mention my name, but it was clear they were scrambling to contain the damage. James even appeared on a podcast, his voice as smooth as ever, as if he'd rehearsed for hours. We live in an age where people are quick to assign blame, he said, his tone calm but contrived. I've made mistakes, everyone has. But sometimes people misinterpret decisions that are just part of running a business. I almost laughed out loud listening to it. His words were perfectly staged, but no one was buying it anymore. His excuses were just echoes in an empty room. The fallout came faster than I expected. On Wednesday, Sarah called me from her office, her voice brimming with excitement. Ethan, 2 senior executives at Carson and Blake, just resigned, she said. Insider sources say the board knew about James's misconduct for years, but swept it under the rug to protect the company's reputation. She paused, then added, and James has been placed on administrative leave, pending an internal investigation. His LinkedIn profile vanished last night. No posts, no comments, just silence. I sank onto the couch, still holding the phone, trying to process the news. James, the man who'd called me replaceable in the worst way, was now being sidelined by his own company. I thought I'd feel vindicated, but I didn't. I just felt relief, like a heavy weight had been lifted from my chest. But the battle wasn't over. Carson and Blake were still trying to salvage their reputation, and Sarah warned me they might hire a crisis management firm to soften public opinion. They'll try to rewrite the narrative, she said. But we're ahead. The Wall Street Ledger article changed the game. Now everyone's watching them, not you. I nodded, but stayed vigilant. I knew James and Carson and Blake wouldn't accept defeat easily. They'd look for ways to retaliate, and I had to keep standing strong, not just for myself, but for Emily, Ryan, Hannah, Karen, and everyone who'd put their faith in me. In the meantime, Lynn Harper Consulting was starting to take off. Lauren and I held a strategy meeting at our new office, a sleek space in Chicago's Loop, with windows overlooking the river and gleaming glass walls. We were building a team, smart, dedicated people, many of them former Carson and Blake employees, like Ryan, who'd quit to join us. I couldn't stay there after what they did to you, Ryan said, as he signed his contract. Lynn Harper is where I want to be. His words made me realize this fight wasn't just about me. It was about creating a place where the real builders were valued. That weekend, I took Mia out for dinner at a cozy pizza joint in Wicker Park, where the smell of fresh-baked crust and soft jazz filled the air. Mia sat across from me, wearing her Chicago Bears hoodie, laughing as she told me about the math test she'd aced. "Dad, are you proud of me?" she asked, her eyes sparkling like stars. I smiled, squeezing her hand across the table. "I'm always proud of you," I said, "and I hope you're proud of me too." Mia nodded, her gaze serious, the kind only a kid who's grown up too fast can have. "You're my hero," she said, "because you didn't let them win." Mia's words brought a sting to my eyes, not just because she saw me, but because for the first time, I saw myself clearly, not as a victim, but as a leader. That night, after Mia went to bed, I opened my laptop and reread the Wall Street Ledger article. The words danced on the screen, telling my story, Emily's story, the story of everyone Carson and Blake had dismissed. But what stopped me were the comments below, hundreds of messages from strangers who'd been through something similar. "Thank you for speaking up," one wrote. "Your story is mine, just with different names." Another said, "I've been silent too long. You gave me the courage to change that." Reading those words, I realized this fight was bigger than I'd thought. It wasn't just about justice for me. It was about changing how the quiet ones, were treated. I texted Sarah, thanking her for fighting alongside me. She replied instantly, "We're not done, Ethan. Carson and Blake are still trying to claw their way back. But you've done something no one expected. You made the whole industry listen." I smiled, closed the laptop, and looked out the window. Chicago still glowed out there. But now it wasn't a symbol of what I'd lost. It was a reminder that I'd fought, and I was winning. I stood by the window of Lynn Harper Consulting's new office, gazing down at the Chicago River sparkling under the early March sunlight. The temperature outside had warmed slightly, hovering around 40 degrees Fahrenheit, but it still carried the city's signature chill. Below, the loop buzzed with cars and hurried pedestrians. Just weeks ago, I was a fired strategist, clutching a cardboard box as I left Carson and Blake in humiliation. Now, I was a CEO, standing in a sleek glass office, leading a team that was reshaping the consulting industry. But what filled me with pride wasn't the title or the office. It was the journey I'd taken, from a betrayed employee to someone who'd written his own story. The legal battle with Carson and Blake had reached its climax. The Wall Street Ledger article had been a bombshell, exposing James Carter's manipulation and shaking the company's reputation to its core. James was placed on administrative leave, 2 senior executives resigned, and the board was thrown into chaos. But I knew they wouldn't go down without a fight. Sarah Mitchell, my lawyer, had warned me. They'll try to salvage this at all costs, Ethan. It could be a public statement, or worse, another countersuit. You need to stay ready. I nodded, but fear no longer gripped me. With the support of Lauren Brooks, Emily Watson, Ryan Keller, Hannah Reed, and Karen Ellis, I wasn't fighting alone anymore. On Friday, just a week after the article, Carson and Blake made their final move. They sent a settlement offer through Sarah, a hefty sum, paired with a confidentiality clause, requiring me to stay silent about the case. Sarah called me from her office, her voice dripping with sarcasm. They think they can buy your silence, Ethan. 6 figures, but you'd have to sign a gag order, promising not to say another word. What do you think? I chuckled softly, looking out at the glittering Chicago River. They still don't get it, I said. I didn't do this for money. I did it for justice. Reject it. Sarah laughed over the phone. I knew you'd say that. All right, we keep fighting. Rejecting the settlement was like pouring fuel on the public's fire. New articles kept coming, not just from the Wall Street Ledger, but from outlets like Forbes and Business Insider. The man who turned a firing into a leadership triumph. One headline read, "Ex-strategist brings consulting giant to its knees." Another declared. Each story was a reminder that I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for people like Emily, Ryan, and Hannah, the quiet builders who'd been dismissed and erased by Carson and Blake. By the end of the month, Carson and Blake surrendered. They agreed to settle the lawsuit with public terms, an undisclosed compensation amount, an official apology posted on their website, and the departure of 3 more senior partners who'd been complicit in covering up James's actions. More importantly, they committed to internal reforms, an independent ethics board, quarterly transparent. It didn't fix everything, but it was a start. I refused the confidentiality clause, a final statement of defiance. If they thought they could buy my silence, they clearly hadn't been paying attention. As Carson and Blake struggled to salvage their reputation from the ashes, Lynn Harper Consulting rose like a new star. Lauren and I secured 2 major contracts with Fortune 500 companies, one of them a direct competitor of Carson and Blake. Our office in the Loop grew busier by the day, filled with a team of smart, dedicated people, many of them former Carson and Blake employees who'd quit to join us. Ryan Keller, who'd sent me the project timeline, was now our head of analytics. I couldn't stay there after what they did, he said at our first team meeting. Lynn Harper is where I see the future. Ryan's words made me realize that this company wasn't just a business. It was a symbol of change, a place where the real builders were valued. But the true victory wasn't in the contracts or the reputation. It was in the small moments, the ones that made me feel I'd done the right thing. One afternoon, I received an invitation from Northwestern University, asking me to speak at their annual Women in Leadership Conference. They wanted me to share my story under the theme, How to Become the Architect of Your Own Power. I accepted, not because I craved the spotlight, but because I knew someone out there needed to hear that the way things used to work didn't have to be the way they'd always be. I also started getting messages from strangers, people who'd been through similar betrayals, overlooked, dismissed, erased. Your story gave me the courage to leave a toxic job, one wrote. I thought I had to stay silent to survive. Thank you for proving me wrong. Another messaged, I'm a single mom, and you made me believe I can fight for myself. Each message was a reminder that my fight wasn't just personal. It had sparked a movement, however small, for the invisible to be seen. One Friday evening, Mia and I sat on our apartment's porch, watching the sunset paint the Chicago sky in streaks of orange and purple. The air was warmer, carrying the promise of spring, and I felt a rare sense of peace. Mia sat beside me, her legs swinging, scrolling on her phone. Dad, you're on TV again, she said, giggling. I laughed. I'm starting to get tired of my own face. Mia shook her head, leaning against my shoulder. No, I think it's cool. You didn't let them treat you like you didn't matter. I kissed the top of her head, the weight of her words sinking in. Not just because of Mia, but because they showed she now believed in what was possible for her own life. Carson and Blake's story ended in silence. An announcement on their investor page confirmed they'd lost 3 more major clients. Their stock plummeted 12% in a week, and the board declared a comprehensive restructuring. James Carter never resurfaced publicly. Some rumors said he'd moved to another city, trying to start over. I didn't care. He was no longer the focus of my story. The focus now was Lynn Harper Consulting, Mia, the people I'd inspired. Myself, the man who'd learned to stand up and never stay silent. Lynn Harper Consulting entered its second year with a growing client list and a reputation for integrity. We weren't just a consulting firm. We were proof that you could build something good from the ashes of betrayal. I still worked late, but now, I did it for myself, for my team, and for a bigger purpose. Every new contract, every employee we hired, every strategy we crafted, was a reminder that I'd chosen the right path. Not the easy one, but the honest one. One evening, as I was reviewing my Northwestern speech, Mia walked into the room, holding a painting she'd made in art class. It showed me standing on a stage, with the words, "My dad, the hero." I hugged her, my throat tightening. "When did you make this?" I asked. "Today," Mia said, beaming. "I wanted you to know how proud I am." I hung the painting in my office, right by my desk, a constant reminder that every struggle was worth it. Looking back on this journey, I realized it wasn't just about defeating James Carter or Carson and Blake. It was about proving that the system, no matter how powerful, could be challenged. People like me, the ones who work quietly, who build from behind the scenes, aren't invisible. We have the power to change, to stand up, to tell our story. And when we do, we don't just change our own lives, we change the world around us. I want to thank you all for following my story. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. And I hope it's inspired you to stand up for yourself, for justice, for what's right. If you found this story meaningful, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss what's next. We're stronger when we share these stories together. Thank you, and I hope to see you again soon.